Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us again for another week. Hi, Barry.
Hi, Del.
We're just talking about our remodel dramas here, but Barry's quite I'm coming to the end of mine, hopefully, touch wood, but Barry's just starting his.
But I got another few weeks.
We were talking, and I noticed a couple of times this week with clients that the subject of saying no came up. And one person described it as the hardest no I've ever had to say. And that was a request from her son for something that she just really couldn't fulfill. But it was hard for her to say no. And another client finally said no about a request that had been made and said, "Oh my God, I can't believe how good I felt when I said no."
There you go.
And so it's really interesting. I thought this is and this again is somebody that struggled for months to say no, but finally said no and was surprised at how good she felt. So I really thought it would be a great topic to dive into about why some of us, not everybody, has a hard time saying no. And, I can only talk from my experience, which is I was raised to be a good girl. And good girls always say yes. And they're not selfish. They put other people's needs ahead of their own. And even when it's something that you can't afford to give, you're supposed to say yes, even if it costs you. And what I equated that to mean was, if I say no, I am bad and unlovable. So those are my experiences. So Barry, how do you feel about saying no?
In a similar way, because I felt like if I said no, I might incur the wrath of somebody's upset. It was never actually necessarily vocalized. It's just because of the way I was treated a lot of times by other people when I was a kid, there was this be nice type thing, even though I was as a boy. So, of course, I did get in a lot of trouble doing other things too, because, typical boy stuff. But in situations with other people, I found myself oftentimes being compliant and saying yes because it was the easier path. Because saying no would create resistance. And oftentimes I felt like I didn't have to justify things, and then I would be found out to be lying or something else, and it would be much more painful. So better off to just say yes and put up with it. And I remember one thing I remember thinking as a kid is it wasn't so much, as I've heard this before in other places, they say about, give till it helps. I used to give till it hurt. And because it was basically like you were saying, you overextend, even when you can't give, you still give, you still say yes, because part of it, and I know we can talk about this more, I know one of my patterns as a kid was a people pleaser because I wanted people to like me. And so if I said yes, I presumed they would like me, versus if I said no, they wouldn't. So I wanted to say yes just to be liked by people, even though it cost me, as it did you.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember once years ago when I was in therapy, my therapist saying to me, resentment is your body's way of letting you know that you gave more than you can afford to give. And I thought, it was a good one, because and it's so true, and I'm thinking about, as I said, one particular client who said that she wanted to say no to somebody for a few months, but felt bad about it. And eventually she said no. And she said, I was so surprised at how good I felt. And this brings up the resentment thing. And the thing is, we think, we can sit there and go, why did they ask that of me? They know that, I don't want to do it, or they know whatever. We blame the other person for making the request. That's the point. And then we do something again as to be good or to, avoid conflict or whatever. And then we resent the other person. We blame them for our feelings. And what this woman, what she was really highlighting when she said, God, I can't believe how good I felt when I said no, was, I said, that's because that part of you inside was going, yay, you stood up for us. You said, so there is this sort of great sense of agency and being a grown
Ownership.
up when
Yeah,
you
ownership too.
say that again, sorry.
And ownership too.
Exactly, ownership. That's exactly that you put yourself on an equal footing with somebody else, never mind ahead
Hmm.
of somebody else, but
Right.
that you
Yeah.
didn't put yourself behind or beneath, or that your feelings were less important than the other person. So I said, yeah, that's where that good feeling comes from. And when we don't when we do say yes when we mean no, that feeling of resentment, it's not actually at the other person, it's at
Mhm.
ourselves for not standing up for ourselves.
Right.
That's that yucky feeling inside. We like to
Yeah.
project it onto others, but it's our own disappointment in ourselves for not defending ourselves or sticking up for ourselves or being honoring ourselves.
Right. I mean, we did an episode just to come back quite a while ago now. We talked about agreements. I think we
Mm,
talked about, and I said one of the things is that in agreement keeping, one of the biggest freedoms is stop saying yes to everything and start saying no to things that don't work. And it was about self-honoring choices. Again, feeling like you're saying, self-esteem, self-support, and feeling like we owe ourselves that level of respect to say, you know what, this isn't going to work for me.
mhm.
And it's not against anybody. It's the other part as well, is that oftentimes when we think we're saying no, we think we're throwing stones at the other person sort of thing. Well, what we're actually doing is saying yes to ourselves by
Mm,
saying no to something else. And when we flip the script and recognize that what we're doing is positive, not negative, that's when we can change the whole paradigm that no is not a bad word.
yeah, exactly. And this is where I think last week, we talked about reparenting that inner child. And
Yeah.
that just ties into that. It's the ability to be able to say to that inner child who wants to say yes to everything, wants to keep everybody happy, wants to sort of not rock the boat, just to say to them, you may not have been able to say no when you were a child, but you're an
Hmm.
adult now and you
Yeah.
can say no. Doesn't make you a bad person, doesn't mean that you're unlovable, doesn't mean you're going to get into trouble or any of those things. It's okay. So it's so interesting, and I wonder. I was thinking initially. I was thinking, is it more of an expectation we put on little girls than little boys? This be a good girl. Oh, that's just what boys do. Boys are naughty, so we let them. I'm just wondering if there is actually a distinction there. What would you say your experience was, Barry?
Speaking from the boys' side,
Yeah.
I think you're right. There is definitely a sense that the girls are nicer than boys. Therefore, but therefore, if they acquiesce and say yes, that keeps the niceness going. Whereas boys, um, even though they should be obedient, oftentimes it's the rebellious and the um, independence spirit that boys are supposed to have that maybe them saying no isn't so frowned upon.
Hmm.
So I think you're right about that. Yeah, I think boys and girls are looked at differently when they say no.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that's changing. Hopefully that was just our generation.
Definitely. Yes,
Setting
definitely.
up the new generation of kids. So let's look at some of the benefits of saying no. First of all,
Mhm.
besides the what we were just saying, that self-honoring, um, and your self-esteem that feels, because we know when we're not um, acting in our best interest. And that
Right.
actually lowers our self-esteem, believe it or not, even though we think we've justified in saying no because it makes us more lovable or nice or whatever. It chips away at our self-esteem. So that's number
Mhm.
one. I think
Yeah.
when we do give ourselves permission to um, to speak up, have a voice, say what's right for us and what's not right for us. So that alone can build your self-esteem. So
Sure.
what are some of your
I would say one of the ones is when we keep saying yes, we're overextending ourselves and we drain ourselves. So definitely when we say no, in as you said, in a positive light, in a self-supportive saying yes to ourselves, we start to discover we can start taking care of ourselves better. We start saying, you know what, I'm not going to keep overextending myself, draining myself, and being worn out. I can actually be in a place where I say no, so I can actually say yes to myself and actually have time and energy to take care of myself and do what I want to do. So
yeah.
there are lots of little nuances on that level as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that. Exactly. Less burnout because you're not overextended, and
Hmm.
and just more the times that you are saying yes, you're more present. You're not resentful, as we talked about, uh,
Right.
and you can be a better friend, better partner, better parent, better daughter, child, whatever.
Mhm.
I mean, there's so many ways you can flip that script, and as you say, see that it's actually a positive, not a negative. To be selective with what you choose to spend your time doing.
That is, I mean, it. I mean, it's amazing we're having this conversation like it's something new because this is so foundational. Somebody, I mean, to me, it's like, of course, this makes so much sense. Of course, my 5 or 6 year old didn't know this, and yours didn't either. So I understand that many people listening to this may consider this new information to them. But part of me is like, do we have to go in that deep? Because it sounds so obvious to me now. As the challenge of having been through this work.
Yeah. No, I know, but I think I said a couple of weeks ago that there were belief systems that I carried from childhood that, I remember arguing once. I was in my 20s, but there was a spiritual teacher, and the issue of not being good enough came up, and I remember saying, "But I'm not good enough because I have proof." My me,
Yeah,
oh, I argued blind for my belief that I was not good enough because of the actions of somebody else that took place when I was just born. That, I
right.
mean, my rational mind now goes, how on earth could that have made sense to me up into my adulthood? But it did.
Hmm.
And so, to
Yeah,
your point, this seems rudimentary, but it's it is shocking how many of us are on automatic pilot. We
yeah.
just we just say yes when we mean no because we want to avoid that feeling of feeling bad or being a bad person or being
It
vulnerable.
is. This is so key because there's so much stuff in the world I think that we are going through where we feel like to fit in with a crowd or to belong to a group or just to say yes to a partner is the right thing to do, regardless of our own choices, our own independence. And say no would somehow disassociate us with all of those things. So it is, again, no is not a bad word, as the title says. The thing is that it's recognizing that no is safe, that no is allowable, that no is not against anybody. It's probably one of the biggest changes. That was one of the things for me, is that I thought saying no was like throwing slings and arrows at somebody else
Mhm.
or demeaning myself versus saying no just simply says no. I'm saying yes to myself and flipping that. And I want to keep saying that because I think for me, it's really getting anchored deeper in myself, that saying no to somebody else is saying yes to myself.
Mhm.
That is such a shift of awareness and of feeling, so that no becomes an easier word to use in the right proper way, so to speak.
Yeah, and when you're just talking there, Baron, you said something about that flipping the script or something. It
Hmm.
just made me aware of when we don't do the work around no, how not only do we, are we, what's the word I'm looking for, not promoting our own self care and things like that, but how do we also perceive no from somebody else?
Yeah, there's a good one.
That is, if we've got this script that we have to say yes no matter what, and I still have a little bit of it. I joke with
Oh,
my
me
German
too.
friend, because I always say if I say yes to something, I show up even if I got a broken leg or whatever. I say yes, I'm going to show up, and
Yeah.
I joke with her. I say, well, I'm British, so we keep going, whatever. And she's
Hmm.
German, and then but she's really because she says no a lot now, and I just say,
Right.
"What happened to you?" We were the only two that always said yes to everything and always showed up, but now you say no a lot, and I it's so funny, but there is that part that if I have a script for myself that is an unconscious script, I'm gonna have the expectation that everybody else has the damn same script.
Hmm.
If I don't say no, you better not say no either.
Right. No, and that I think that's one of the things is good to say about that thing about other people saying no. I know that I had it inside differently when Sue was saying no to me versus me saying no to them.
Mhm.
Whereas like the way that somebody said no to me was like a lot easier to deal with than if I said no to somebody else and might quote hurt their feelings because the
Mhm.
wiring was in there for me. And like you're saying, like I still, when I say no to people, there's part of me just goes, let me check if it's okay. Let me see if I'm going to react. That saying no and then going, let's step back a bit before I get hit. Like thinking there's still a part of me that reacts to that feeling. It's dangerous to say no.
Yeah.
And the thing that I get clearly, and I'm looking at recent experiences I had, where saying no was like as soon as we said no, we moved on to the next thing as if nothing happened. It was like it wasn't a big deal anymore, even though part of me still carried it that way. So it is a good thing to do like a experiential check to see how it is actually landing because we carry beliefs sometimes that don't match reality.
No, exactly. Yeah. That's so interesting too, and also how going back to that sort of when somebody says no to us, how we perceive that. And I know, I mean, it's embarrassing. I can't believe how much I confess to on this show. I'm just like, here's my dirty
The
laundry.
listeners love it.
Here's my dirty laundry. So I used to hear no as you're not important to me.
Mm,
That was that it hurt.
yeah,
I
yeah.
never, it wasn't that, oh, the rational mind didn't come in and say, oh, well, they're busy and they can't, and it's not something they want to do, and they have a right to that. It'd be like, oh, I can't mean that much to them. If they could just say no like that without even flinching, then I must mean, so it's really, really good. And then where does that take you? You're
Mm.
not spinning this whole story about the other person doesn't care about you, or it's so fascinating. And thank God, as I became more comfortable with saying no myself, I don't have that reaction anymore when somebody says no to me. I'm like, oh, they're just taking care of themselves. They're just prioritizing. There's nothing wrong with it. Doesn't mean
Well, if it
anything
makes,
about me.
right. If it makes you feel any better, I
Yeah,
have that same experience from when I was younger too. That I felt my value was based on other people liking me,
yeah.
and so if they said no to me, that means they didn't like me. So I definitely had that same wiring. I just didn't admit it as easily, but I am now. But it is the sense that that was something I carried on as well. Especially again, in my teen years, being bullied and pushed around. So any glimmer of being liked was so tentative, and so any refusal or any no just added more manure to the pile of crap that I carried myself around in.
Mm. Yeah. I'm just curious, what about in your family environment? I mean, did they, um, how was no modeled for you?
Um, basically, just when you said that, what hit me was that the no's in my family were usually because we couldn't afford things.
Mm,
So the no was like, oh man, it was disappointment. It wasn't emotionally devastating. It was just the fact that life. It was like the no's can define the impossibility of life because we're working class. We didn't know much growing up, and so a lot of times when I wanted something, like when I said my dad's like, I want to get this, I want to get a bike, I want to get these things, and he's like, no, not against me, but
mm,
because we can afford it. So I took on the weight of the. And this is one of my things I'm still working through the financial walls that I carried around. So there was a lot of no's on that level. There was. I'm just thinking of the things I did find myself having to say yes to things that stretched me in good ways. Like when I got bad grades at school, I couldn't say no to not doing any better. My dad would say, you can do better than this. Like, yes, dad, that sort of thing. It was kind of that was a ritual almost because we always had that encouragement pushing at the same time to do better, sort
mm,
of thing. But in terms of in the family dynamic, um, I mean, my brother and I used to bounce off each other with the yes no thing anyway. That was just the way we were because it was like we had to be contrary with each other no matter what. So it wasn't so much no as a pivotal thing. It's just like because they said yes, I had to say no, or he said no and I said yes, sort of thing. It was that game we played as kids.
mhm.
So in that sense, I don't think I had such a big weight of no in the family. It's more external to it where I had the challenges.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. As I asked you that question, I was reflecting on my experience of hearing no, and I think my mother was very comfortable saying no, um,
Mhm.
certainly with the children, but her her, her what she taught us was completely different from what she modeled. It was an absolute, you always put other people first, and it's like, well, you don't. And
Mhm.
you have to say yes to be a good girl, even when it feels yucky and you don't feel like something feels really off and not nice. It was still like don't embarrass the family, which was like, hang on a minute, I think we've already done that.
Well, there's the times our parents were driven by the do as I say, not what I do, sort of thing, which
Yeah.
is what my parents did the same thing. So I understand on that level, even though very different experiences. But
Hmm.
yeah, that was kind of an MO for them in a way.
Yeah, yeah, very much. What would the neighbors think, and um,
Hmm.
how does it look to the outside world, and
Oh yeah.
things like that. So yeah, I think also, again, going back to some of the positives, and you mentioned this, was um, it really builds up that confidence from within, that
Hmm.
we're not, um, you know, number one, judging our self-worth based on someone else's reaction to us.
Right.
So the more that we are okay with our own choices, it builds that, again, that self-esteem, that confidence from within, that and that
Yeah.
independence, independent of that outer, looking for outer affirmation all the time. Like, if I do this for you, do I feel, will you like me? And it
Yeah.
brings us to another subject, which is probably a deeper thing, but we are so attached to behaving in a certain way, believing that we have more power over another person's opinion of us, or view of us. And
Hmm.
when we think about how much we self-sacrifice just in hopes that somebody will say they like us, and it's
Oh
so
yeah.
precarious. It's so precarious. And I'm noticing that within myself as I've got older. There's been a certain situation I I really know that I would never have said what I've said this last year, even the year before, for fear of how I was perceived. And
Hmm.
there seems to be this awareness that I'm having. I think it comes with age, where I'm more letting go of being the good girl and asking for what I want, and again saying no to things that I'm not in agreement with. And it's really, I'm like, wow, that is such a change. Even just in a year, I can see that I've let go of saying yes just to make you happy so that you like me. I'm okay with myself regardless of what you think of me.
The thing, and yes, that is a deeper topic. We definitely could talk about that as well. And but it's also, talking what we talked about before about how we perceive what we think is going on versus what's really going on,
Hmm.
and how we then make judgments and how we respond accordingly to that. There's there was something came up as an idea I was going to give as a quote homework assignment, which I'll get to in a second. But and I will say this just in this way for a second. I'm in a coaching program right now, and we're having this conversation about how working to have a conversation with a prospective client. The goal is not to get them to a yes; it's get them to clarity. So for us, yes or no are both valid equally. It's the maybe and the lack of clarity is the issue.
Hmm.
And so what I was thinking about offering to those listening, if they want as a homework assignment, is how can they, because I know it's homework for me, create a situation where when you say yes or you say no, there's no difference in energetics,
Yeah.
and you can be okay with each one. Because in this way, what you're saying is the fact where you do carry such a presumption about how we are perceived by others and how we need to act for others to like us. If we both say and receive yes and no equally, that's the big asking above that in a sense. Like, how do we be in equanimity to a degree, no
Hmm.
matter what happens? Because that's really in every relationship one of the ideal places to be. Not to be numb, but to be balanced in a way we can respond comfortably either way without like taking a nosedive if someone said no, or ascend to the heights because they said yes. You
Hmm.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great, and it is so true. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about, I love Michael Singer, and I know it's his teachings are based in Buddhism, but just
Hmm.
that everything is neither for us or against us. It's just information, and the way we
Yeah.
sort it is to the good pile, the bad pile. I really see, as I say, that when I was younger, the a no went on the, oh, that's a bad pile. That's so loaded. Where the yes
Yeah.
was on the good pile. But as you say, it's a lovely reminder that yes or no, it's clarity. I mean, that's wonderful. The ambivalence of, oh, I don't know, and maybe. And I think I shared a few weeks ago with I can't remember what the show subject was about, but with my ex, who wouldn't say no to his mother, just to a dinner invitation. It was like,
Hmm.
better tell her on the day that something came up, you're ill, rather than tell her the week before, no, I can't do this because I have other plans. And
Hmm.
I remember thinking, oh my God, you'd rather inconvenience somebody, have them prepare this meal and tell them last minute not showing up, than as you said, go through the emotional disappointment of, because again, his mother would and I loved her dearly towards the end, but she would perceive a no as she was less important than the other plans you had. And
Yeah.
if you were a good child, you would cancel the other plans and come to dinner on the day that suited her, not like
Yeah.
we'll reschedule for next week. So I can
Hmm.
understand, my ex's fear of upsetting her because her wrath could be. It was very silent. I used to say it was like a slow moving freight train. It's like you,
Slim but deadly.
it's silent and deadly. Understand, but at some point, again, that feeling you have when you can't stand up to your own mother and say no. And again, I was thinking about it this morning. It was so funny. I was thinking about my mother. I was listening to a book on tape as I was going for a walk, and I remember my mother used to love to go out for cake. That was her, her afternoon tea. So I'd go back to the UK and we'd go out for afternoon tea. And there was a time when I really was, I'm pretty health conscious, but I never wanted to eat the cake. I just didn't want to eat the cake. And my
Hmm.
sister would be kicking me under the table saying, eat the cake. And I'd be like, it's like, why do I have to eat cake to keep mum
Right.
happy? Why am I okay with my, smoked salmon sandwich? But it would really anger my mother if I didn't eat cake. It was so funny. And
Well,
I
yeah, but
know I had
but
to,
it's conditions again about proving yourself to valued.
yeah,
Sorry, yourself worthy. To accomplish, you have to do these things to be accepted and worthy by the other person,
yeah,
because that's the way we're wired, and because especially the way we're raised, it's like no wonder that was the pressure you were getting put on you.
yeah. And my sister always used to say to me too, she kept saying, um, when you're packing to come home, make sure you don't pack black, pack colors. Mum likes colors. And I'd be like, oh my, I've got to buy a whole new wardrobe to make my mum happy.
Mhm. Right.
My sister, it was very funny, but yes, it's that um, that ability to have agency over your own self, how you dress yourself, what food you put in your body, anything like that. It's so funny. And actually, as thinking about it, I'm thinking about, often it's that sort of what often leads to eating disorders is that this is the
Mhm.
final agency I have over myself is what I put into my body, what I
Right.
because if you're in an environment that's so controlling that no is not even a you know
Possibility.
possibility, that's the final one of the final things is I can keep my mouth shut, I won't take in food, that kind
Right.
of control. So it's a very interesting subject. No,
Yes, it is. It is indeed.
encourage you all to go out there and practice no's. So maybe with baby steps first, no on the smaller
Mhm.
things till you get more comfortable. But notice that feeling you have inside. It's like a gleeful feeling of, oh my God, I've grown up a little bit. Oh my God,
Mhm.
I've actually, taken care of myself here.
And the thing is also is you the discover again from my personal experience. Oftentimes, when I had such a full plate or a full schedule, when I say no to something, the relief and the freedom I discover because I've now got a gap in my schedule because I've chosen it for myself. It's like, wow, that's so cool.
Yeah,
So yeah, the possibilities are wonderful.
that's wonderful. That's a good one to leave it on. Well, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Barry. And we
Thank
will
you,
see
Bill.
you all next week.
All right, take care of yourselves.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye. We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode fresh and shiny as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.